American football is one of the most violent and dangerous sports in the world. With each hit and block intended to devastate the opponent, football attracts the most aggressive and strong-willed athletes on earth. Whether it's a championship boxer or a middle linebacker, the mentality is the same.
How do you feel about the guys you were in the ring with?
I wanted to kill them.
The most violent and aggressive athletes on earth, ready to die on any given Sunday. However, the violent collisions that reverberated throughout the American football field seeped through the arena and into the realm of criminality.
A former member of the Oakland and Los Angeles Raiders has been charged with murder.
There was another awful shooting, this one in South Carolina. A doctor, his wife, 2 of their young grandchildren among the 5 who were killed in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And tonight authorities believe it was a former NFL player.
Draft pick, he went to the St. Louis Cardinals.
Robert Rozier was sentenced to 22 years in prison after pleading guilty to the second-degree murders of 4 people.
And over the middle, getting free. Touchdown, Hernandez.
As reports come in that an arrest warrant has been issued for New England Patriot Aaron Hernandez. This after a body was found less than a mile from the 23-year-old tight end's home.
That's the Los Angeles District Attorney commenting on the fact that O.J Simpson is now a fugitive from justice. Police are now searching for him. Simpson has been charged with 2 counts of murder, with 2 counts, that is, for the murder of his ex-wife and her male friend.
3 decades-old murders to the so-called I-5 killer. Investigators say DNA technology, quote, definitely proves, end quote, that Randall Woodfield killed a total of 7 people during a 1980s crime spree.
But they suspect the I-5 killer is responsible for as many as 24 more.
This is just on the sheet metal logistics services. I have 2 technicians on that location. I just had one call me screaming that he had been shot, and the other technician has also been shot and not responsive.
I think we've had some trouble at 4456 Marshall Road.
What's going on Marshall Road?
I think there's been a bad shooting. Maybe 4 people. Yard, I heard some shots.
How many shots did you hear?
About 20. Because the guy walked out of the house. It looked like a black guy in black clothes carrying something red out of the house.
The young journeyman had trouble finding his footing in the NFL. A 7th-round draft pick taken by the San Francisco 49ers, Adams suffered a severe ankle injury his rookie year that threatened to end his career. But he fought back, and after being cut by the 49ers and bouncing around the league, he finally felt that he found a place he could call home.
He's got a little different burst than anybody else. Play action, Peyton deep on the sideline, and it's intercepted. Great leaping interception by Phillip Adams at the goal line on a pass that might have been a little bit...
Hopefully, situation will be, a good one for you. I think this one is. You want a place you call home.
Phillip Adams' time in the limelight would be short-lived, as he would suffer 2 concussions in the span of 3 games, ending his 2012 season on injured reserve. Adams would then be a part of a variety of teams, ending with the Atlanta Falcons in 2015. Adams' life as an NFL player was over, and a new one would soon begin. Adams scribbled away frantically. Adams' sister then approached, asking what he was writing, and he stated that he was writing a new book. Consumed with curiosity, she peeked over her brother's shoulder. She was horrified by what she saw. Nothing made sense. "I've never seen anything like it," she stated. His handwriting changed drastically. It was almost like another person was writing. Adams' family had noticed some drastic changes in him for quite some time since his departure from the league. His moods were often erratic, with his temper seemingly escalating each and every day. Adams was also in tremendous pain. His 6 years in the NFL had worn on him. His father stated that he was in constant pain. His whole body hurt, especially his neck and back. He had memory issues and difficulty sleeping. He had started to further isolate himself, especially from his young son. In 2019, Adams decided to open up a smoothie shop, but the COVID-19 pandemic derailed the business venture, closing in less than 1 year.
We got 45 caliber shell cases you can see. One of the victims is advising that there is a woman and kids inside the house. We've got forced entry into the residence, possibly victims inside.
Neighbors nearby are evacuated as a search for a suspect begins.
Police say that Adams himself, after an hours-long standoff,
Adams would dress in a dark hoodie and camouflage pants, and would put on a jet black motorcycle helmet. He armed himself with 2 automatic rifles, mounted a 4-wheeler, and pulled out of the driveway of his parents' home, making his way just a mile away to the home of Dr. Robert Leslie, a mansion in a wooded area. And there he would kill 6 people in cold blood, including Dr. Robert Leslie himself, his wife Barbara, their 2 grandchildren, and 2 HVAC workers who just happened to be at the home that day. Adams was now alone in the house, as the police successfully evacuated his handicapped mother and his father. In a standoff that lasted several hours, and after police had sent in a robot to try to find Adams and scope out the home, the police charged into the house at approximately 2:30 a.m. Adams then grabbed his pistol and turned it on himself.
And less than 24 hours ago, another mass shooting in South Carolina. A former NFL player is now reported to have killed 5 people.
Mass shooting, and another community now searching for answers this morning. This one left 5 dead in South Carolina, including a prominent doctor and 3 of his relatives. The suspect, a former NFL player.
Phillip Adams allegedly went on a shooting rampage before turning the gun on himself.
local authorities are calling this a devastating blow to their community.
Dr. Leslie was a pillar in this community with what he was able to give back.
The city of Rockville, South Carolina, mourned as they tragically lost one of the pillars of their community. The question of why was yet to be answered. What would cause Adams to commit this horrendous crime, and why did he target Dr. Leslie and his family?
Just tell me what you know and what you can say, sir.
Well, I can say that he's a good kid. He was a good kid, and I think the football messed him up.
Crime. Members of a doctor's family shot and killed in their home by a former NFL player. Now, an autopsy has determined he had an unusually severe case of brain damage he suffered from his days on the field.
A murder rampage that ended with the gunman's this past spring is being blamed on the condition of the suspect's brain.
Dr. Ann McKee, who examined Adams' brain, is blaming CTE, a degenerative brain disease, saying that this case was unusually severe. CTE is found in people with a history of head trauma.
Phillip Adams was diagnosed with CTE, but what made Adams different from other players diagnosed with the same condition was that the CTE was unusually severe in both of Adams' frontal lobes. The frontal lobe is responsible for higher cognitive functions, such as memory, emotions, impulse control, problem solving, social interaction, and motor function. The second stage of CTE is associated with progressive cognitive and behavioral abnormalities, such as aggression, impulsivity, explosivity, depression, paranoia, anxiety, poor executive function, and memory loss. This discovery gave the community a sense of relief and comfort, as it provided a reason for Adams' irrational behavior leading to tragedy. However, We may never know why he targeted Dr. Leslie. Rumors swirled that Adams may have been a former patient of Leslie and had been cut off from medication for his pain, but there's no evidence the police could find to support this claim. Rumors also arose stating that Adams' cryptic notebook with strange emblems showed potential signs that he was in some kind of religious cult, but the family stated that they had never heard of or suspected that Adams was involved in anything of that nature, and that the strange incoherent writings were a reflection of his deteriorating mental health. To support the Leslie family, check out Dr. Robert Leslie's book, Angels in the ER.
A former member of the Oakland and Los Angeles Raiders has been charged with murder. Los Angeles prosecutors say Anthony Wayne Smith, number 94, and 2 other men beat and shot a man 2 years ago. Then authorities say they dumped his body near the Antelope Valley poppy fields in Lancaster.
A former defensive end for the Oakland Raiders is now facing charges in 4 killings in Los Angeles County. Smith is now accused of killing 2 brothers in 1999 and killing another man 2 years later. Then in 2001, he's accused of kidnapping another man in Los Angeles and stabbing him to death.
The Nettles brothers, Kevin and Ricky, the owners of the car wash, were getting ready to lock up when a man entered their small office, gun drawn. The man was tall and wearing a green police jacket with a metal badge clipped to his belt. The man then ordered Kevin to step out of the office. Ricky, meanwhile, had been across the street helping a friend close his barbershop. But no sooner than he had crossed the road, he had also been taken into custody by the man and placed into the back seat of a car, and he drove away. That would be the last time anyone would see the Nettles brothers alive again.
Former Raiders defensive end Anthony Wayne Smith heard the ruling today for the 1999 killings of 2 brothers.
Smith is now accused of killing 2 brothers in 1999. There's no clear motive in any of those crimes.
The Nettles brothers' bodies would be found dumped on the side of the road in 2 separate locations in Compton. Both were still handcuffed, their heads wrapped in duct tape, and both were shot multiple times. There were also signs of torture prior to death. The police also found that Ricky's apartment had been broken into. And during the course of their investigation, one prime suspect arose.
You can't change the world, but you can change the life of one kid. Become a mentor at the Los Angeles City Housing Projects.
Anthony Smith, former defensive end for the Raiders, was at the top of the police suspect list. He matched the description, but due to lack of evidence directly linking Smith to the crime, the case soon went cold. On June 5th, 2001, a body was found in the back seat of a red Chevy Impala. The man was brutally beaten and stabbed. The body was that of Dennis Henderson, a friend of Smith's, and during the police's investigation, Dennis's brother Barry pointed them in one direction. But the police failed to follow through, and once again were unable to link Smith to the crime directly. Smith's streak of seemingly good fortune would soon run out.
Then authorities say they dumped his body near the Antelope Valley poppy fields in Lancaster.
Now, prosecutors have charged him for 3 other murders in Los Angeles County and killing another man 2 years later.
Smith, who is 48 years old, heard the ruling today for the 2001 murder of another man. Evidence showed that they were also tortured.
Mauricio Ponce kissed his wife and left his home for the final time. Mauricio's body would soon be found on the side of the road, bound and shot several times. The police were quickly able to obtain Maurillo's phone records and found that several calls had been made between Anthony and Maurillo that very night, and were able to track their movements, placing Anthony near the area of the crime. Detectives soon began to stake out Smith's home, and soon enough, they saw Maurillo's white Lincoln Navigator he had taken on the night of his death, parked in one of Anthony's parking spots with a switched out license plate. A search warrant was issued, and inside Smith's home they found an AR-15 with a flash suppressor and 9mm ammunition, but no coinciding weapon. Smith not only had Maurillo's car in his possession, but his missing phone as well. Smith was placed under arrest for the murder of Maurillo Ponce.
Right now, murder trial of a former Oakland Raiders player ends in a mistrial. 44-year-old Anthony Wayne Smith, accused of killing a mechanic in LA County in 2008. A jury did not reach a verdict after 9 days of deliberating. Smith will remain in custody and will be retried.
After a mistrial in which the jury was deadlocked 8-4 in the prosecution's favor, a retrial was soon scheduled to begin. This time, Smith would be facing 3 murder charges on top of Maurillo Ponce's murder, the double murder of the Nettles brothers, and the murder of Dennis Henderson. Dennis Henderson's brother, Barry, would be the key to Smith's downfall. As Barry explains, he and Anthony were going out for lunch, but Anthony made a stop at a storage locker. Inside the storage locker, Barry saw knives and bundles of zip ties, police raid jackets, machine guns, silencers, hand grenades, tons of ammunition, and a book on how to assassinate someone. Anthony also bragged about killing 2 brothers that owned a car wash.
Raiders defensive end Anthony Wayne Smith is sentenced to life in prison without parole. Smith, who is 48 years old, heard the ruling today for the 1999 killings of 2 brothers and the 2001 murder of another man. A jury convicted him last November for all 3 of the deaths.
On November 5th, 2015, Smith was convicted of the murders of Ricky and Kevin Nettles and Dennis Henderson. The jury had once again deadlocked on Ponce's murder, 9-3. Smith was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Many who knew Anthony before his tenure in the NFL stated, he had changed his personality entirely. This wasn't the Anthony he'd grown up with. Not even the Anthony he had known through his years in the NFL. The dude is gone. I don't know who that dude is.
For 10 years, this Liberty City building has been the home of the Yahwehs. Its leader, Yahweh ben Yahweh, the self-proclaimed Son of God, but Yahweh ben Yahweh, the former recluse, went public. He opened the doors to his temple, showed reporters his school. He became involved in various chambers of commerce, brought up numerous hotels, cleaned up dilapidated apartment buildings. He opened restaurants and stores, becoming a part of Miami's business community, even rubbing shoulders with elected officials at grand openings.
Little did the public know that the Temple of Love housed one of the most notorious and deadliest cults in American history.
SWAT teams stormed the front door of the Yahweh's fortress-like headquarters in Liberty City called the Temple of Love.
And privately, residents and police investigators were hearing horror stories about the Yahweh. Robert Rozier was sentenced to 22 years in prison after pleading guilty to the second-degree murders of 4 people. Now his testimony might send Yahweh ben Yahweh to jail. Tonight, Yahweh ben Yahweh is in a federal prison facility some 60 miles outside New Orleans. The self-proclaimed Son of God was arrested on Wednesday, charged with racketeering and giving the orders to kill 14 people.
Rozier roamed the city streets with fellow members Seth Israel and Ahir, Israel. The bright lights of the American gridiron had now faded. The athlete who came out of high school as a proclaimed athletic wonderkind, going to Berkeley and eventually becoming a St. Louis Cardinal, now tried to find his way in a world where his skills of wreaking havoc in the backfield were now useless. The group entered an apartment complex and lured out 2 of their tenants, guns drawn, and killed one on the spot, as the other fled and Rozier pursued. Rozier caught up to the man, and as he pleaded, he was gunned down in cold blood. Bodies littered the Miami streets. Detectives believed the killer to be a deranged Vietnam vet, but the reality would turn out to be much darker. One of the community's most respected and revered leaders would be at the very center of these killings, and his #1 hitman would be former Cardinal Robert Rozier.
2 men were shot to death early this morning at the complex taken over by Yahweh's.
The Nation of Yahweh, a religious movement classified by many news outlets as a cult, had recruited Rozier after his retirement from the NFL. Rozier accepted the faith, gave up all his possessions, and changed his name. After joining the cult, Rozier wanted to join Yahweh's Brotherhood, also known as Death's Angels, which had the job of carrying out secret missions for the group. But the initiation incurred a heavy price. Rozier had to kill a white devil, as the leader called them, and bring back a body part for proof. Rozier would terrorize Miami, murdering 7 people, with a new body seemingly found on every street corner.
Of Liberty City. You do not need to travel through Liberty City or over town. You are urged not to.
In one such incident, Rozier and a fellow Death Angel roamed the Miami streets for 4 hours, and they finally found a man asleep in his parked car. The 2 men approached and stabbed the man to death and took a trophy with them. But they lost it on their way back and went back to take the other. But it would be Rozier's 7th and final victim that would bring down Rozier and the Nation of Yahweh. A witness had identified Rozier as the shooter of that final victim and was quickly arrested and charged with murder. And while initially being uncooperative, he soon began to feel the pressure mounting and would become the prosecution's star witness. Yahweh and his 15 disciples would be accused of 14 murders, extortion, and running a racketeering enterprise. Rozier himself would confess to 7 murders and would be charged with 4 and would be handed a reduced sentence of 22 years for his cooperation. There was only one problem. The prosecution could not prove that Mitchell, the leader of the Nation of Yahweh, had directly ordered the murders. And in turn, 7 disciples were sentenced to 15 to 16 years each, and Mitchell himself for 18 years for being guilty of conspiracy. They had gotten away with cold-blooded murder. In 1999, Robert Rozier, after serving 10 years of his 22-year sentence, was released under a new identity. But as fate would have it, he was once again arrested, this time not for murder but for bouncing bad checks. Under California's 3-strike law, prosecutors sought felony charges. He was sentenced to 25 years to life.
Few have fallen as far or as hard as former NFL star Aaron Hernandez.
This is New Time. We are following breaking news as we continue to track the potential connections between a North Attleboro homicide investigation and New England Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez.
We have new information on the homicide investigation in North Attleboro, which has thrown Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez into the spotlight.
Eyewitness News has new video which shows Hernandez arriving at his attorney's office in Boston earlier today. The football star has not been charged with anything, but he's reportedly not being ruled out in the investigation.
CBS News is reporting that Odin Lloyd was dating the sister of Aaron Hernandez's fiancée.
The hands that caught so many touchdown passes in handcuffs today as he was led into court, charged with the brutal murder of his friend Odin Lloyd.
Hernandez had gotten into a fight with the bar manager over 2 drinks Hernandez maintained
he hadn't ordered. Instead, according to authorities, Hernandez punched the manager so hard his eardrum burst.
On former New England Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez, under investigation for yet another crime.
This as a brand new investigation has been launched into his possible involvement in 2 other murders last year.
Madam Foreperson, on indictment 2013-983-A, charging the defendant Aaron Hernandez with murder. What say you, Madam Foreperson? Is the defendant not guilty, guilty of murder in the first degree, or guilty of murder in the second degree?
Teams have played, they just simply have no answer for him. Antrell roll on him now, going to try and jam him off the line of scrimmage.
Second and a deuce, and over the middle, getting free. Touchdown, Hernandez.
Can't do that.
Way to get us started. That's what I'm talking about. That's why we got you.
Catching a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl would mark the high point for Hernandez's career in the NFL. Coming out of college, Hernandez was touted as one of the best receiving tight ends of the 2010 draft. However, due to his off-the-field issues during his time with the Florida Gators, he fell to the 4th round and was drafted by the New England Patriots.
The 25-point, the youngest player in the National Football League.
At a bar, a 17-year-old Aaron Hernandez was eating with fellow teammate and quarterback Tim Tebow. At the conclusion of the meal and drinks, Hernandez refused to pay, and as Hernandez was being escorted out of the restaurant, he turned and punched the owner, rupturing his eardrum. The police quickly responded and wanted to charge Hernandez with felony battery. However, the Florida Gators defense attorney was able to settle this incident out of court. Later that year, at a nightclub in Miami, 3 men left the club. They were stopped at a light a few blocks away when an unknown assailant approached the car and fired several rounds, wounding the driver and passenger, but leaving the rear passenger unharmed. Corey Smith was in a coma for 2 days while the passenger Justin Glass was shot in the arm. Randall Kaysen, the rear passenger, saw the perpetrator and claimed that there had been in fact 2 people. The triggerman, which he described as a Hawaiian or Hispanic male who had a large muscular build, stood about 6'3" or 6'4" and weighed about 230 or 240 pounds and had a lot of tattoos. And a black male, which he identified as Reggie Nelson, a teammate of Hernandez and future Jacksonville Jaguar and Cincinnati Bengal. Both Hernandez and Nelson had in fact been at the nightclub that same night. Kaysen also told investigators that his older brother, who was shot in the driver's seat, had gotten into an intense altercation with the Florida Gators team earlier that week. Reggie Nelson disclosed to investigators that earlier that night, Hernandez had told Nelson that Kaysen had snatched one of the Pouncey twins, Mike and Marquise, gold chain. All the Florida players called in for questioning readily talked with the detectives, except Hernandez. Hernandez declined to speak to the police, and invoked his right to counsel. Police later stated that neither Nelson nor Hernandez were suspects, and the incident was soon forgotten. The Patriots had a reputation for acquiring players with off-field issues and indoctrinating them into the Patriot way. Hernandez's rookie contract was structured in a way that would incentivize discipline and walking on the straight and narrow. Hernandez was in the perfect situation to succeed. Soon Hernandez would become one of the most lethal receiving threats in the NFL. The Patriots, however, had drafted a tight end earlier that same draft.
Gronkowski gets up and moves still forward, still going down the sideline.
Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez would form to be the greatest tight end tandem in recent history. On July 16, 2012, two men were ambushed and executed in cold blood. And at the center of this tragic shooting would be none other than Aaron Hernandez. According to surveillance footage, Hernandez and another man, Alexander Bradley, went into the Boston nightclub at about 12:30 a.m. on July 16, 2012, shortly after the shooting victims went into the club. Hernandez quickly downed 2 drinks, and he and Bradley left after about 10 minutes. Surveillance video then showed Hernandez driving a Toyota 4Runner with Bradley as a passenger. The footage then shows the victims leaving the club at about 2:10 a.m., and Hernandez's SUV passing by them twice as they walk to a parking garage to get their car. The victims then drive off, and the SUV soon follows suit. The men, now stopped at a light, look over to see an SUV pull up next to them. A man in the back of the SUV began to yell racial slurs at the victims, who were of Hispanic origin, and fired several shots at the vehicle, killing 2 and driving off. At a club in Florida, Hernandez was with a couple of friends, celebrating when they noticed 2 suspicious individuals across the club. Hernandez's paranoia had gotten worse throughout his tenure in the NFL, and he believed that the 2 men were undercover cops. A friend of Hernandez, Alexander Bradley, was there with him that night, and after informing Bradley about the 2 men, Bradley responded by saying that they may be tracking us for the double murder that happened outside of the club in 2012. On their way home from the club, Bradley would doze off and awake with Hernandez pointing a gun straight at him. Early the following day, the manager of a John Deere store found him outside, bleeding from his head and hand. Miraculously, Bradley had survived the point-blank shooting. When medics and police arrived, Bradley refused to talk to them and ID that Hernandez was the shooter. This was personal, and Bradley wanted revenge. Over the next few months, hundreds of texts would be exchanged between Hernandez and Bradley, ranging from death threats to extortion. At one point, Hernandez offered up to $1.5 million for Bradley to keep quiet. Bradley later filed a civil lawsuit, and the case was settled for an undisclosed amount.
Your Honor, the defendant is charged with the murder of Odin Lloyd.
As the former pro football player faced a judge just hours after the New England Patriots released him from the team. Hernandez is now accused of killing Lloyd just a few days after they got into an argument at a nightclub.
A Massachusetts State Police helicopter circling in the air over Aaron Hernandez's home in North Attleboro. State police troopers gearing up along the side of a road nearby.
Florida Gator football star Aaron Hernandez in jail tonight, charged with first-degree murder in the death of a semi-pro football player. 27-year-old Odin Lloyd was found dead on June 17th, less than a mile from Hernandez's home.
Ladies and gentlemen,
On June 16th of 2013, at just after 9 p.m., the defendant was leaving his home in North Attleboro with his fiancée, Shayana Jenkins. He texted Odin Lloyd. He told Odin Lloyd that he, the defendant, Aaron Hernandez, was going to come up to his house that night.
The trial had now started for the murder of Odin Lloyd. Hernandez was charged with first-degree murder and 5 gun-related charges. After Hernandez was arrested, he would be released by the Patriots approximately 90 minutes later. Almost the entire event of Odin Lloyd's murder would be mapped out with CCTV footage, much of which was Hernandez's own home camera, which he had installed as his paranoia continued to heighten. Hernandez texts Lloyd saying he wants to meet up. Immediately after sending those texts, he texts 2 of his other friends to come to his house ASAP. Hernandez is then seen on home surveillance holding a gun in his hand and kisses his young daughter before leaving in the Nissan Altima with the 2 friends. At 2:10 a.m., Hernandez is seen on surveillance at a gas station where he is seen dancing in the street. At 2:32 a.m., Hernandez and his friends arrive at Lloyd's home, and Lloyd's sister sees him get into the Nissan Altima. At 3:07 a.m., Lloyd sends a text to her sister stating, "Did you see who I am with?" And he responds, "NFL." At 3:23 a.m., Hernandez's car is seen driving to a secluded area in an industrial park. Hernandez returns home, this time without Lloyd. And we see Hernandez walking through his home carrying what looks to be a firearm. And the home surveillance footage is then shut off. Odin Lloyd's body would be found shot in the industrial park. And on June 26, 2013, Hernandez would be arrested outside of his home and would be charged with first-degree murder. Throughout the course of the trial, various other incidents in Hernandez's past came to light, including the 2013 Miami shooting of Alexander Bradley, the 2012 Boston double homicide, and other altercations throughout the course of his football career. In the 2012 double homicide, Hernandez was acquitted of the murders after a 6-day deliberation by the jury. However, according to the Boston Globe, there was powerful evidence that Hernandez was at the scene and played a role in their deaths. And on April 15, 2015, a verdict was reached in the murder of Odin Lloyd.
What say you, Madam Foreperson? Is the defendant not guilty, guilty of murder in the first degree, or guilty of murder in the second degree?
Guilty of murder in the first degree.
Madam Foreperson, by which theory or theories, deliberate premeditation and or extreme atrocity or cruelty?
Extreme atrocity or cruelty.
Hernandez would take his own life. Hernandez's brain would be researched by Boston University, and they would find that Hernandez had stage 3 CTE. Researchers described Hernandez as having the most severe case they had ever seen in someone of Aaron's age. This led many to believe that his actions may have been directly caused by his severe form of CTE.
Long ago, football was a game for heroes. That hero came forth. His mother named him Orendo. The press called him O.J. And later, millions hailed him simply as the Juice.
In a case that seemed to have exhausted all of its shock value, O.J. Simpson, now formally charged with a pair of gruesome murders, is a fugitive tonight.
Mr. Simpson is a fugitive of justice right now.
The murder charges allege that Simpson stabbed Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman with a knife on Sunday night outside Mrs. Simpson's house in the Brentwood section of Los Angeles.
Is he on the run? The news stuns the world that had come to know Simpson as an American success story.
He calls Simpson, quote, a statue in the park kind of hero.
We saw perhaps the falling of an American hero.
There's a manhunt underway in Southern California And O.J. Simpson, the 46-year-old former football star, one of America's best-known personalities, faces the possibility of the death penalty.
Absolutely. Again, Pat, at this point, it is a pursuit, and unfortunately it has a lot of mitigating circumstances because of the high profile of the proposed suspect that's inside the vehicle, which could possibly be and appears to be at this time O.J. Simpson.
Obviously, the Jets did not want to be the team that let O.J. get the record, but there's just no stopping O.J. Later in the game, in the fourth period, he got a chance to go for 2,000, and he had a chance to get to the showers a little early this afternoon as Buffalo went on to a 34-14 victory.
One of the greatest to ever play the game, he wore his favorite number, 32. Tonight, O.J. Simpson wears a different number. The number assigned to him at L.A. County Jail.
On June 12, 1994, Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman would be found brutally slain at the doorsteps of her own home. As police and detectives arrived on the scene, they discovered alongside the bodies of Brown and Goldman a blue knit cap, a left-hand extra-large leather glove, and a bloody set of footprints through the back gate, and some drops of the assailant's blood. Upon realizing that one of the victims was Nicole Brown Simpson, O.J. Simpson's ex-wife, detectives were sent to notify O.J. of her murder and for him to pick up their children. They waited outside Simpson's residence for nearly 30 minutes, but there was no response. Detectives noticed his car was parked in an awkward manner, and there was blood on the car door's handle, which caused the detectives to believe that someone was in immediate danger, and entered Simpson's property and discovered the right-handed glove matching the left-handed glove found at the crime scene. Simpson was brought in for questioning and was asked to supply a DNA sample to compare with what the investigators found at the crime scene. Simpson readily agreed and gave some blood for it to be tested. The DNA results had come back, and Simpson was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The LAPD had notified his lawyers and expected him to surrender by noon that day, but when the time came, Simpson was nowhere to be found. He had fled and was now on the run.
3-second violation called out of line.
This is a Channel 5 News special report.
There is a rather amazing story developing in Los Angeles this hour where California Highway Patrol is in pursuit of a white Ford Bronco, a car that was reported to be one that might contain O.J. Simpson and a friend earlier today.
And he was with those people this morning when he was supposed to turn himself in, when he was supposed to go with the policeman down to Parker Center.
The white Ford Bronco cruised at a measly 35 miles per hour. Simpson was armed and in a mentally fragile state, and police were careful not to escalate the situation. The chase lasted nearly 45 minutes and ended at his Brentwood estate, where he finally surrendered and was taken into custody. What would follow would be one of the most notorious and controversial criminal trials in American history.
How do you plead to counts 1 and 2?
Absolutely 100% not guilty.
And do you?
There he was, once one of America's greatest heroes, standing before a judge, charged with the most brutal of crimes, double murder. It was the first of many days in court, which are sure to come.
The filthiest, dirtiest, nastiest word in the English language. It will upset the black jurors. It'll issue a test, it'll give them a test, and the test will be, whose side are you on? The side of the white prosecutors and the white policemen? Or are you on the side of the black defendant and his very prominent and capable black lawyer?
Not every African American feels that way. It's demeaning to our jurors to say that African Americans cannot hear these offensive words.
It's not like
you're really listening to their words. Because you key on what's the truth and what isn't.
Detective Furman, was the testimony that you gave in this case completely truthful?
I wish to assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Detective Furman, did you plant or manufacture any evidence in this case?
I assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
At this time, the people would ask that Mr. Simpson step forward and try on the glove recovered at Bundy as well as the glove recovered at Rockingham.
If I put this knit cap on, who am I? I'm still Johnny Cochran with a knit cap. And if you look at O.J. Simpson over there, O.J. Simpson in a knit cap from 2 blocks away is still O.J. Simpson. It's no disguise. It's no disguise. It makes no sense. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Los Angeles. In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information.
O.J. Simpson was found not guilty in the murder of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. The trial had quickly become an issue of race rather than the evidence that linked Simpson to the crime. And the majority of African Americans today, 57% and 83% of white Americans, believe that Simpson did commit the crimes in question. In 1996, the parents of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown's father filed a civil lawsuit against Simpson for wrongful death. In 1997, Simpson was found responsible for both deaths on February 4th, 1997, for $33.5 million. In 2007, Simpson was arrested for armed robbery and was sentenced to 33 years in prison. Simpson was released in 2017 and is now a free man.
Randall Woodfield to 7 murders, but they suspect the I-5 killer is responsible for as many as 24 more.
Approximately 700,000 cars travel the Interstate 5 daily, stretching across 3 states, home to beautiful landscapes, and home to one of the United States' most notorious serial killers.
And have linked 3 decades-old murders to the so-called I-5 killer. Investigators say DNA technology, quote, definitely proves, end quote, that Randall Woodfield killed a total of 7 people during a 1980s crime spree in Oregon and California.
December 9th, 1980. A string of violent armed robberies would occur up and down the Interstate 5 corridor, and all the robberies would follow the same MO. A man wearing a fake beard and a hoodie would enter an establishment, gun drawn, demanding all the cash they had, frequently assaulting employees, even shooting the cashier during a robbery. A particularly strange feature would be noted in witness statements. The bandit wore a football-like nose strip on the bridge of his nose. The assailant would soon be given the name the I-5 Bandit by the media. However, the I-5 Bandit would become much worse than anyone could have imagined. .7 and 40, cuts on a dime, hustles, good hands, fluid and smooth, catches well in crowd, good jumper. Randall Woodfield had shown promise during his college days at Portland State University, and was drafted to the Green Bay Packers in 1974. Woodfield was a bit of a loner, but was considered nice and a ladies' man amongst most of his teammates. But others saw something a bit darker. He was a little strange, maybe stranger than we thought. You just had a bad feeling about the guy, like there was something underneath his mask. Woodfield was offered a 1-year contract by the Packers and showed promise during training camp. However, on August 19, 1974, before the start of the season, Woodfield was released. The Packers had discovered a dark string of incidents in Woodfield's past, and it would mark the end of his career in the NFL and would mark the beginning of a much more sinister one. On October 9, 1980, Sherry Lynn Ayers was found murdered in her apartment. And among the first suspects police questioned was Randall Woodfield. Woodfield had just been released from prison for second-degree robbery and had shared correspondence with Sherry Lynn Ayers during his imprisonment. However, after DNA results came back, Woodfield's did not match and he was released. On November 27th, a man and woman were found bound and murdered in their own homes. Woodfield was once again questioned, but released due to a lack of evidence tying him to the murders. These 3 murders would be committed by Woodfield prior to his string of armed robberies that would earn him the nickname the I-5 Bandit. However, soon the I-5 Bandit would earn a different name, the I-5 Killer. On January 18, 1981, 2 women were assaulted and shot, one of which survived. On February 3, 1981, a mother and daughter would be found shot to death in their home. And on February 14th, a woman would be found murdered in her home after having coffee with her attacker. The police had Woodfield labeled as a prime suspect for months, ever since the first murders took place, but were unable to find a piece of evidence that could bring him down. But detectives were readily closing in. By tracking phone calls placed by Woodfield, which placed him near murder sites at around the same time the crimes had been committed. Detectives once again brought in Woodfield for questioning. Placed in a lineup, Woodfield was identified as the killer by witnesses, and his house was searched, where they found a .32 caliber shell in his house, which matched the ammunition used at the crime scenes. Woodfield would be charged with murder, robbery, and a plethora of other charges, and would successfully be convicted on the murder of Sherry Hull and was sentenced to life in prison plus 90 years. In the following years and decades, with the advancement in DNA testing, Woodfield's body count would climb, linking him up to 44 deaths and hundreds of other crimes. Woodfield is currently serving life in prison, and to this day has not confessed to any of the murders.
It is a film that speaks an international language, the beauty and violence of professional football.
When it comes to the damage to Aaron Hernandez's brain, doctors say they've never seen anything like it. Dr. Ann McKee has confirmed the former NFL star had the worst case of chronic traumatic encephalopathy ever seen in someone his age.
That startling new theory about O.J. Simpson from the groundbreaking doctor featured in the movie Concussion, he is convinced the fallen star's years on the football field may have given him a brain disease.
On to the other news this evening and to the autopsy tonight on former NFL player Phillip Adams. That autopsy now revealing he was suffering from an unusually severe form of brain disease, CTE, when police say he killed a prominent doctor, his wife, and 4 others.
Dr. Bennett Amalu saying he thinks Simpson has the brain disease CTE from thousands of hits on the football field and should serve as a cautionary tale.
O.J. Simpson is more likely than not suffering from CTE. He was exposed to thousands of blows to his head.
It has long been suggested that some of these men's actions may have been directly caused by their careers of playing football and developing the disease known as CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Symptoms which include explosive, impulsive behavior, impaired judgment, criminality, and mood disorders. 2 of the men who have passed were diagnosed with unusually severe cases of CTE, and as for the other 4, we can only speculate, as it's a disease that can only be diagnosed after death. But it has been heavily reinforced by Dr. Bennett Omalu that O.J. Simpson has a very high likelihood of having CTE, stating, "O.J. Simpson is more likely than not to suffer from CTE. I would bet my medical license on it." CTE is not the only factor, but it certainly contributed to the men's rash actions. Five NFL players who sent shockwaves around the world. Monsters hidden in the shadows of NFL lore. Monsters the NFL hopes are forgotten.